Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. It's always an honor to be here at Toronto Global Forum and have the opportunity before the next panel to showcase examples of leadership at a time of rapid industrial, technological, and economic transformation. This year, I'm thrilled to jumpstart the next discussion, an exciting conversation on building the infrastructure of the future and catalyzing economic growth. Here in Ontario, we are leading the charge by putting more shovels in the ground to future-proof infrastructure for key drivers of our economy, ranging from mobility and energy to housing and digital technologies. By investing in innovations that will power the infrastructure of tomorrow, we are building a more sustainable future, making our industries more competitive on a global scale and driving economic prosperity for generations to come. Ontario is doing this through a number of initiatives that foster the growth of homegrown companies, local companies, technologies, and talent, closing critical gaps between lab and markets. Through initiatives like the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network, or OVIN, as we like to call it, and the Critical Industrial Technologies Initiative, or CIT, delivered by our teams at the Ontario Centre of Innovation, Ontario is driving the development of new technologies, bringing these to market, and leading their adoption. In doing so, Ontario is responding to the infrastructure challenges of today and future-proofing the infrastructure of tomorrow. As Ontario's flagship initiative for the automotive and mobility sector, OVIN, is fostering the growth of made-in-Ontario technologies that enable our transportation networks and power our grids to respond to future needs. We're proud to support the development of leading-edge infrastructure solutions to power the mobility technologies of tomorrow. One example is addressing the lack of EV charging infrastructure in multi-unit residential and commercial buildings. I'm going to give you some examples of projects that we've supported with no names here, although I can give you more information later. With the support of the Ontario government and industry partners, we now have access to uniquely made in Ontario platforms for managing EV charging and energy consumption. This is a prime example of how Ontario is paving the way for grid sustainability, its stability and resilience, while addressing one of the biggest barriers to EV adoption. OVIN is also driving the growth of new technologies that address challenges related to energy demand and grid management, energy storage and transmission, and technology that supports system operability across the grid and vehicle and charging infrastructure. These innovations form part of Ontario's larger vision to close the gap across the province's charging infrastructure network, accelerate the adoption of EVs, and usher in a future that is even more connected, autonomous, and electric than ever before. Beyond mobility and energy, Ontario is also laying the groundwork for the future of construction and its central role in advancing infrastructure. Under the Critical Industrial Technologies Initiative, or CIT, Ontario is catalyzing the adoption of advanced technologies like 5G-enabled monitoring, robotics, AI, and more to empower infrastructure owners and operators to improve efficiency, build more resilient structures, and of course, meet delivery and sustainability targets. More than technology development, Ontario is pushing the boundaries of innovation by integrating new technologies in real-world environments and paving the way for them to enter global markets. Today, for example, we are witnessing novel applications of technologies like drones to assess the structural integrity of bridges at international border crossings and mitigate maintenance needs. Similarly, we're proud to support the use of digital twins to enable real-time monitoring and predictive maintenance of aged infrastructure and enable proactive infrastructure management. Lastly, another last example I'll give you is we've also made it possible for Ontario companies to leverage city roads and infrastructure as test beds through an initiative that we call the OVIN Pilot Zones. We've partnered with the City of Toronto, we've partnered with the Blue Water Bridge, and stay tuned for more exciting announcements of major pieces of infrastructure in this country that we will look to leverage to support our companies to pilot technologies, show what they've got, potentially make a sale, and then sell to the rest of the world. By unlocking new environments for validating novel technologies, we also have supported growing cities into tapping into power of geospatial mapping technology, rapidly identifying optimal locations for new infrastructure, record existing assets, and uncover gaps within the transportation network. Beyond applications here at home, Ontario is also expanding its footprint across the globe and bringing homegrown technologies, local Ontario technologies, to global economies. in customers. We're building on a long history of international cooperation by fostering partnerships with countries like Korea, for example, where we signed a partnership with KAIA, the Korean Infrastructure Agency. And what we're looking to do is to not only support bilateral R&D efforts, but to advance Ontario-made technologies further through piloting through OVIN's partnerships with KAIA. This is a key part of the strategy: connect Ontario companies to infrastructure owner-operators in global markets, foster collaboration, and integrate groundbreaking solutions in environments around the world. And we're going to continue to make those partnerships so that we continue to create highways, as we like to call it, for our companies to enter global markets and to create new customers, and of course, to increase exports, trade, and create good-paying jobs here at home. If there's one thing that we have learned from these initiatives, it's that they hold the undeniable potential to benefit everyone. The innovators behind them, the infrastructure owner-operators that test and adopt them, and of course the communities where these innovations will be deployed. Ontario is driving real economic impact and unlocking the ability of infrastructure to catalyze economic growth by opening up new pathways for procurement and investment, creating good-paying jobs, and improving lives of Ontarians and people across our province. As we listen to the conversation today, I invite you to think about how we can continue to build infrastructure for a new era, one that responds to our evolving energy, mobility, housing, and technological needs. I invite you to think about the importance of collaborating across sectors, from funders to government, owners and operators, small businesses, researchers, and everybody else, more to power a more resilient and competitive future for all of us. Together we can build, power, move, and house the communities of the future. Thank you very much, everybody.
Well, thank you so much to Raed for that starting point for this next discussion on the new era of infrastructure. Our excellent panel guests are about to make their way out onto the stage for a session that's going to be moderated by Maxine, Ethier, a partner with McCarthy Tétrault. So let's give them a round of applause as they do so.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our panel discussion on future-proofing infrastructure for competitiveness, resilience, and inclusive growth. Thank you for joining us. Infrastructure is the foundation of our economies and society. It connects people and markets, powers innovation, and underpins the quality of our lives. Yet, as we look to the future, we face a complex set of challenges: rapid technological change, climate risk, shifting democracies, and the urgent need for more inclusive and sustainable growth. These aren't just Canadian challenges, they're global imperatives that we need to address. Today, we bring together leaders from Canada and South Africa to share insights and solutions. We've structured our discussions around 4 key themes. The first is the state of infrastructure today. We're going to take stock, look at the current state of infrastructure in different regions and sector, where are the gaps and where are the opportunities. Our panelists are going to offer perspectives on Canada's national landscape, South Africa's priorities, evolving needs in mobility and airports, and the private sector's view on what's changing. Second, financing and policy innovation. We're going to explore financing models and policy approaches enabling infrastructure renewal, expansion, and development. Third, resilience and evolving needs. How are we building infrastructure that can withstand climate risk, economic shocks, supply chain disruptions? Our panelists will discuss strategies for ensuring that infrastructure investments deliver measurable impact and support economic resilience. And finally, our last theme, technology and the human dimension, focuses on digital transformation of infrastructure. How are new technologies reshaping the way we design, build, and operate infrastructure? Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Let's get started. So Ehren, I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Excellent. My name is Cory. I am the CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We're a federal crown corporation that was created to be a catalytic investor in infrastructure projects here in Canada, by which I mean we invest alongside the private sector to get more infrastructure built faster. You want me to talk about the state of the world as well, theme one?
No, maybe pass it along.
Amazing. Mameetse, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maxine. So I'm heading an organization called Infrastructure South Africa. This is a central agency of government which is mandated to coordinate, to facilitate, and to manage major government infrastructure investment projects, so high value, high impact infrastructure initiatives. We work upstream of the value chain, so you know there's project origination, project preparation and planning, and then there's the funding component, and then your contracting and procurement, and then implementation. We work upstream of the value chain, so we focus in the main on preparing and packaging viable and bankable infrastructure pipeline across the main economic sectors of the economy. Thanks, Maxine.
Michael?
So Michael Denham, Vice Chair with National Bank. National Bank, for those that don't know National Bank, we're the 6th largest bank in Canada, headquartered in Quebec. We just finished an acquisition of Canadian Western Bank, so we're now fully installed kind of coast to coast. We're quite active in the major project infrastructure space, and some of you may have seen, we have a new ad campaign on TV, and the tagline is build something, so it feels great to be in a discussion all about kind of building something in Canada, so it feels particularly fitting to be here.
Perfect. Yanic?
Hey, my name is Yanic. So we're going to have a new airport in Montreal soon. I'm the president and CEO of the Montreal Metropolitan Airport. A couple of months you'll be able to fly there. So the Montreal Metropolitan Airport was a general aviation airport. It's been there for 100 years. It's being converted now into a commercial airport. If you want, it's like a Billy Bishop, but probably twice bigger. And it's about 15 kilometers away from downtown Montreal. We're going to have shuttle, a train. We're going to have we have direct access to the subway station of Longueuil. Montreal has a subway network. So very excited to be here and take question and talk about this very interesting project, because we also have developed it in less than 3 years. So 2 years of construction. So again, I think it's a fantastic panel. I'm very happy to be invited today.
Great. All right, so let's get started on the state of infrastructure today. What's the current state of infrastructure, whether it's in Canada or as you think about it at the bank in South Africa, or when you're really deep in it, doing a big project like the Montreal airport? Ehren, you want to start?
Sure. Sorry, I jumped the gun before. I wasn't sure. Yeah, I think at the CIB, as we invest in projects, we see 3 or 4 big trends happening right now. So the first is the overwhelming need to invest in electrification to build the power supply, so on the generation, battery storage, transmission that we need to power our economy going forward. I think we are investing massively in that infrastructure in a way that we're trying to build in the next 20 years what it took us 120 years to build. And I don't think that's not a Canadian thing, that's quite global. I think that need to invest massively in our energy systems, one. The second mega trend we see, if I think of the state of infrastructure today, is the need to build for a rapidly decarbonizing economy. So how do you build the infrastructure that helps us through that transition? That's really complicated because there are some things that are transitional in nature. You need them now, but you don't need them eventually. And so how do you build those things and get through a transition to a world that is a high-performing economy that's decarbonized? The third trend we see, if you talk about the state of our infrastructure, is just we went through decades here in most of the developed world of underinvestment in our infrastructure. So we've got massive backlogs or gaps in our infrastructure. So we're trying to build a new plane, the electrification and energy transition we need, while also fixing the old one that we were flying. And so I think there's this dual challenge of rebuilding really rapidly deteriorating in the developed world, for sure, road networks, rail networks that we haven't invested in sometimes for 50 years. And then there's a fourth one, which is around equity in infrastructure. So how do we build infrastructure for the parts, especially in a country like Canada? This might be a bit Canadian specific, but how do you build the infrastructure that serves all? So I'm talking about Indigenous communities who have had massive underinvestment in their communities for forever. Or in the north, we're a large country that's fueled by, we need to be connected to each other and be able to trade amongst ourselves and with our partners around the world, so that filling the gaps in our infrastructure, I think so those are that's a lot. Those are what we're trying to do all at once. It's what I sometimes call the everything all at once challenge that we face.
And how does that resonate with you as you think about South Africa?
Very much similar to what Ehren has said. We often joke in Infrastructure South Africa that we are building a plane as we fly it, because that's essentially how it feels like. From our side, we're coming off from a very low baseline from an infrastructure investment perspective. We are the most industrialized economy on the African continent, the most diversified economy on the continent. But to stay globally competitive, to be integrated in global supply chains, and so on, we have to focus on network industries. We have to focus on investing in economic infrastructure. For a period of time, when the new government came in, or democratic government came in 1994, the focus was really on what we term social infrastructure, getting housing in order, schools infrastructure, building schools, building hospitals, building clinics, and so on. But we realized that in the last 20 years or so, there's been massive underinvestment in economic infrastructure. So not only must we fix the current dilapidated infrastructure, but we have to build new ones, whether it is in energy and electricity, building new transmission lines. We've got 14,000 kilometers of transmission lines that we need to build. We need to be thinking about green hydrogen. We've got a green hydrogen commercial strategy. There's a new port that we need to build linked to that to anchor green hydrogen sector in South Africa. Transport and logistics, of course, a major one, freight rail, to move goods from point A to B and into export markets. We need to be updating and upgrading our current harbors or ports, container terminals, you name it. It's infrastructure that we need to be building in South Africa. And of course, because South Africa is a water scarce country, we have to build new dams, so bulk scheme water infrastructure. We need to be thinking about last mile connectivity in terms of reticulation infrastructure, getting water to businesses, getting water to households, etc. And then, of course, digital communications infrastructure. A lot has been said in the forum from yesterday around investments in AI, investment in data centers, etc. We're looking into investing in all of that. From a South African perspective, though, that market is very much private sector driven, which is excellent. Amazon, global multinationals are all in South Africa, spending and investing multi-billion rands every single year in relation to digital infrastructure in South Africa. But yeah, we are flying the aeroplane as we build it.
Well, that's a good pivot to you, Michael, as you think about the private sector and how the private sector is looking at the infrastructure landscape, where the opportunities are, how they're leaning in.
Yep. So I think for anyone in the room that's part of the infrastructure world, especially as an investor, I think the years ahead are going to be very good ones. As Ehren said, we're starting from a situation now where we have, as a country, we have a pretty massive infrastructure deficit. Denham estimates it's somewhere between $250 and $1 trillion deficit to begin with. And then you look ahead and look at the conference today and all the kind of macro trends and geopolitical forces all argue for a significant investment in infrastructure. whether it's kind of defense or AI or energy. There's a huge amount of investment that has to take place. And I think as a country, just given the geopolitics, there's certain inevitability here of us recognizing as a country it's kind of time to get going on these projects. I think you see early signals from Ottawa, which are encouraging, we'll talk about later. There's a whole need for Canada to shift its worrisome trend towards deindustrialization, to shift its trend around purely exporting energy rather than consuming it to transform our industries. And all that's going to require significant infrastructure east-west in the country. So I think it's going to be very, very positive for the country and interesting for those in the industry period of time that lies ahead.
And Yanic, just thinking about it a bit more specifically to your industry, which is, subset of infrastructure, mobility, transportation, how are you seeing the landscape?
Did I mention that we're going to have a new airport in Montreal? But
hallelujah.
Thank you, sir. Can we all say that together? No. Okay. But sincerely, so yes, there's a huge deficit of airport capacity in Canada. You must understand that Canada has a very unique way of managing airports. In most of the countries, it's either the government running airports or airports have been privatized. In Canada, in the 90s, the federal government has created non-for-profit organization that are now in charge of running the airports across the country. So that presents many challenges. Non-for-profit and not that easy to finance. If you add to that all these non-for-profit are under a lease with the Transport Canada, so toward the end of the lease, it's starting now. For most of the airports, there's only a few decades left to the lease, to the various leases. So it's getting a bit complicated. In addition to that, all the capex work must be authorized by the main airlines, so you can understand that there's a competitive aspect here. So basically, and you must know that airports are a capex game. We just do that, right? Airlines are flying, we put cement, and that's about it, So the market, the travel market is booming. I mean, the world traffic will double within the next 15 years. For a city like Montreal, it's 50 million passengers in 2050. So, and we see all around the world, you have massive terminal being built in Middle East and Asia. From our point of view, in Europe and Canada and United States, we're more into an approach where you need multiple airports to serve a city. So a network of airport. So it's way easier to build those smaller terminals, but also it's reducing the pressure on all the road access to the various terminals. So that's where we're coming in. I mean, we're going to build this new airport. It's going to be open very soon, and because we want to be complementary to Yule, the main airport in Montreal, and again a bit like Billy Bishop has been, and then there's also Hamilton and other airports. So this is where we are right now, and Montreal again very exciting, but it's going to be a tough few years while airport has to invest billions of dollars across the country, while they are in a model where it's quite difficult to get the right financing.
Perfect, because we're moving on to financing. So we've established a huge need. There's lots of opportunities, but there's big gaps that need to be filled. And how are we going to pay for it? So financing policy. Ehren, can we talk about how CIB is looking to address some of these issues?
Sure. So as I mentioned at the outset, and it's fascinating to be with Mameetse to compare notes between the Canadian and the South African experience. But in Canada, I think in the CIB was created in 2018. And I think the insight that the government had was this idea that there are with the huge deficit we have, there's no way, you have to start, the first step is acceptance or something, the first stage of grieving is, maybe that's the last stage, I guess, I don't know, but you need to accept where you are. And I think what we accepted in Canada was we can't afford all the infrastructure we need. And if you don't start from that very basic point, everything else, we have a backlog. Well, why do we have such a backlog? There's many reasons, but one of the most fundamental is we can't afford everything we need to build. So the only way to solve that problem is you need to crowd in others. You need to bring more capital to projects. Governments can't pay for it all. And we have, if you think infrastructure is a very broad class, but fundamentally it's all stuff that delivers public goods. You have social infrastructure, or what we often call economic infrastructure. All of it delivers some kind of public benefit. But it also, much of it, delivers an economic benefit. It drives GDP growth and jobs. It creates revenue, or users of the product, and they'll pay for it. So what the idea of the CIB is, and I think it's one we see in many parts of the world. There are analogs to us in Australia and the UK and Germany and the Scandinavian countries. And I learned today, South Africa, thinking very similarly, is if government can provide a tranche of risk-taking, risk-sharing capital, instead of the old way of doing it, which government would pay for the infrastructure, if instead we can help finance the infrastructure, but do it in a way where we take more risk or accept lower returns than Michael would or than the commercial markets would. If we can do that for a tranche of the project, the rest can then be financed in commercial markets. And so if we do that and we put in a third of the money for a project or a quarter or a half, if that allows the other 3/4 to be financed by the private sector, what we can do is stretch public balance sheets a lot further. And over time, as we get paid back, because all of our investments, unlike a grant from government, we are a loan or an equity investment, they all get paid back with interest over time. If we do that, eventually 100% of the infrastructure will have been paid for, not by taxpayers, but by the users of the infrastructure or the revenue those create. And if we do that effectively, we can grow our capacity, get a lot more built faster. And so if you look today, the CIB, we've invested in just over 100 projects in the country, 102. It's 18 billion or so Canadian dollars. The projects, though, that's how much of our capital is committed to those projects, but the projects have a capital value of over $50 billion. So by us putting in, that's $50 billion that in the, let's say, the most traditional form of infrastructure building would have come out of taxes and grants. And it would take us decades to pay for those. And so we're able to do more faster through this kind of blended model. And I think, as I said, I think it's something that governments around the world are thinking about. And it's a real way to accelerate the investment we need to make and to do it in a way that brings the best of public and private.
Great. And as we look at, so in Canada, we've got this momentum around nation building projects and the new major projects office being formed by the federal government. How's that shaping how you're thinking about it? And Michael, how you're seeing the banks react, but also private capital? I see the momentum it's generating, and this is exciting, but those projects will need financing, they'll need the right approach, and a lot of these are big, complicated projects with lots of challenging risks.
Well, I'll just say briefly, and I'll pass it along, but our observation is these mega projects could be high-speed rail connecting parts of our country, access to critical minerals, new ports, port infrastructure, new types of energy. These projects aren't new. They've been on the books, some of them for decades. Yeah. And the challenge with mega projects like that is they require everything to line up. The regulatory and permitting, the capital construction costs, you need supply of labor. Like the project management of them, and Yanic, who's living this right now, deep in the throes of a project, mega projects they require a lot to come together. And when you're talking about nation building, transformative projects at the scale we need to build, they can really take forever. At the CIB, we often talk about having two speeds of projects. Like one is a wind or solar project. Developers know how to do those. They actually go quite quickly. Mm-hmm. And then nation building projects can take much longer. And so it feels like they're happening at two speeds. And what I observe now in Canada is we're starting to change that dynamic. And we're putting it starts with the ambition to do them, not to have them linger for decades, but then we're starting to line up all of those pieces, regulatory and permitting, financing, stakeholder alignment, all of the labor supply, all of the things that need to come together for mega projects. I think there's a different level of commitment to trying to bring those together so we can move those projects at the same speed that lots is happening in this country. As Yanic said, his project is an amazing example of this. They started 3 years ago and they're going to open sometime in 2026. We need to find how to bring that to projects at that nation building scale. And I think we're moving in the right direction.
Can I jump in on that? Ehren, there's a need for just a ton of capital, a lot of equity capital. We had a good discussion yesterday around kind of private debt and private debt markets, and kind of good old-fashioned kind of bank support as well. So it's a huge amount of money involved, and certainly from a lending perspective, a lot of it boils down to risk. And kudos to what Ehren and the team at Canadian Infrastructure Bank are doing, because it's remarkable the kind of creativity and structure they bring to bear to take a lot of early stage risk out of the projects. And we've partnered on a bunch of stuff together, and it's been a great partnership, and has allowed for projects to happen that wouldn't have happened absent the Infrastructure Bank. And you look at the major project initiative that Ottawa announced recently. Again, there's a huge risk for these projects around timing and certainty. And this summer, the LNG facility in Kitimat was finished, which on the big article in the Globe on the front page, great news, great breakthrough. It took 10 years to get there. Trans Mountain, great development to get oil from the Alberta to the coast. But again, that was like what, 4, 5, 6 times over budget, just because of the kind of timing and risk involved in it. So finding a way to kind of get risk out of the system is going to be so key to get the type of capital, especially lending capacity that needs to be brought to bear. And as Ehren says, you look at some projects like wind, solar, even an AI, a data center for AI. It's almost turnkey, right? There's not a lot of risk left. It's pretty easy to get the funding organized for that. But look at high-speed rail. Going from Quebec, Montreal, you guys are involved, and there's an unbelievable amount of risk in terms of communities, in terms of consultation, in terms of technology, in terms of revenue. And you look at that project, that's a sort of illustrative project of national scale major project. The question is, how do you structure it in a way that kind of takes the risk out to get the billions of dollars of funding that we require? But I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged with the role the infrastructure bank's playing. I'm encouraged with some of the early signals from this government around the seriousness with which we're going to tackle these projects. Again, if we can find a way to kind of frame and tighten the risk, I think that'll unleash the capital we all need as Canadians to see these projects move forward.
And how does that resonate with you in terms of like thinking about South Africa and the challenges? Do you have similar financing models, tools that you leverage?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to contextualize the South African environment a little bit. So the last time we had the highest levels of investment in infrastructure, what we call gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of GDP, that was in 2008-9 financial year. So it was a period leading up to the FIFA World Cup, you know? And it made a lot of sense because both private sector and public sector were focusing on one project, delivering a successful FIFA World Cup. We built the first high-speed rail network in South Africa. We built stadium. We built new roads, broadband infrastructure, etc. But immediately after the World Cup, you'll see even with the data and the statistics, is that we started to really go down in terms of levels of infrastructure. But we have now ensured that we are building a pipeline almost similar and at much bigger scale to the World Cup. Obviously, I mentioned, for example, under the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, there is an aggressive build program to build 14,000 kilometers of new transmission lines. We have your green hydrogen projects, embedded generation projects. We have all of these. But exactly what Ehren is saying is that, of course, we are experiencing fiscal headwinds in South Africa. There is just simply not enough money from the fiscus to be able to drive these massive or significant infrastructure investments that are required. And so the government position is that 2/3 of the funding that must drive infrastructure investment must come from the private sector. Oh. So we have literally been involved in economic reforms, liberalization of the different sectors which were dominated by monopolies as state-owned entities, you know, like power utility, ESCOM, right, or freight and logistics utility, company Transnet, and so on. Now the drive is to build in models that allow for and encourages private sector participation, both from a funding perspective as well as an implementation perspective. And so our project pipeline is no longer reliant on 100% fiscus or fiscal allocation, but is more projects that are PPPs in nature, projects that are blended finance candidate projects, potentially commercially viable infrastructure investments. And so we've pivoted the pipeline to be able to mirror that and respond to the national imperative or national policy goals of government. Yeah.
Great. And Yanic, your project's like the perfect example of that, obviously. It's a project that's moved quickly, that benefited from private capital. How do you what's the financing structure that was utilized? How did you get there? What were the big challenges?
Thanks, Ehren, for mentioning that we're going to have a new airport, 50 departure per day to 25 destination. Yes, so I think the key for us was first to get the support of the community. I'm watching all those presentations of all those great company and organization talking a lot about their own success, etc. But for us, what happened is that, in 2022, we were still a general aviation airport with lots of, let's say, front wind. There was 3 public consultation about the future of the airport. There was a huge campaign for the closing of the airport. There was, so basically, tons of opponents, tons of lawsuits, etc. So what we've done is that we took everything that was said at that time, all the results of the public consultation. We also have, I did myself over 100 meetings with opponent, public employees, government officials, again, citizens, and we've crafted the project. We designed the whole project with the community. Their demands were quite simple, as I was mentioning earlier. They didn't want night activities, so we said, sure, we're going to close the terminal at night. They want the regional airlines to be supported. So now we have the lowest fees in the world for regional airlines. We have room for them. They want the local aerospace cluster to develop because, again, it's a good job and it's aerospace, the future. So we were the reserve land for the cluster. We did a lot of, we took the leadership and the creation of the new, we call it the Espace Aero. It's an innovation space that we have in Montreal. So basically, and from that, we switched from having everybody against the airport to have everybody for the airport. Now we have over 80% of approval of the project. So with that in hand, the idea is that also we need to find financing, as you mentioned, and we're a small non-for-profit, so it's we find the right partner actually to invest into the terminal, which is quite new in Canada. Porter Airline came in with the experience of Billy Bishop. They invest obviously with the support of the Macquarie Group, but also the Bank of Infrastructure du Canada, as well as Desjardins. So we limit the risk for the airport organization. And since it's all private money, it goes very, very fast with the support of the community. But also, we could have done, planning for decades and billions of dollars. But instead, we decide to go by phase, to go slow and see how it goes. So basically, that's why instead of building a 20 million passenger terminal, we start with phase. So the first one is going to be 4 million passenger, and we'll see how it goes and add other phases. It's all planned, but we can also move aside if need be.
That actually brings us on to the third topic. We're going to shrink because we're going to run out of time to speak about O4. But the third topic we wanted to talk about was resilience. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing, Yanic, when you're saying that you're like phasing it out and seeing how it evolves. Like, it's really complex when you're trying to, like, everything is evolving so quickly, risks are changing so rapidly. How do you factor that in when you're planning such a large project like an airport? Obviously, it can't be as dynamic as other types of investments or other types of projects.
Exactly, the phasing is key. We see a lot of, again, infrastructure projects that took so much time to get on rail and get that they're not even relevant anymore. When it takes 15 years before doing something, you can miss the target at the end. So on our side, again, we phased everything. We see how it's going to go. But the important thing also is that we have involved, as I mentioned, the community for the design of the project. But also we have what we call our airport development table, because that's, again, we're here to serve the community somewhere. So for us, it's very key. So we have involved, again, we have this group of 16 political officials. So from all level of government, we have group of opponents again, we have scientists, etc. And we meet every quarter and we decide what's what's gonna go, what we're gonna do with the airport. So and basically we bounce idea. We did a lot of work with on access, on air quality, on noise management, etc. So so basically it's the community that's telling us where to go with this airport. So basically, this is how we adapt. So the consultation is not afterward. It's not just before. It's an ongoing process for us, which I think with that we can. It's going to be hard to miss the point and miss a turn because again, everybody's very critic. Everybody has an opinion, but we can capture all that and make sure that we present the best solution for the community we're serving.
Ehren, how do you guys think about resilience when you're going through your investment process, and does it really factor in? Have you seen projects evolve or take different direction as because you're shifting to thinking about these new risks or these different considerations?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've really been trying to factor into our investment decisions is how people are investing to future-proof, and the volatility we've seen in the last few years. Yanic's talking about resiliency from one angle. From a climate perspective, I mean, we have a project right now. It's another airport. I know yours is opening next year, Yanic. I think you mentioned it once or twice. But we have another airport that we're investing in northern Manitoba, and this is an airport built in the north of Canada in the permafrost, which is now not perma. And so the permafrost in northern Canada is permanently frozen ground, and it's no longer. And so the building is essentially sinking into the ground. And we're way before what should have been the end of useful life. We're building a new airport in Thompson, Manitoba. And I tell you that story only to say that if you're not factoring that into your upfront decisions, you will pay for it later. And so I think as a bank, we've seen that firsthand because we have projects like Thompson. We have projects that were in construction this summer, and then forest fires across this country, where we're laying broadband in a number of we're not laying any broadband, we're investing in partners who are putting broadband in to remote parts of this country, and then those projects are thrown off by forest fire. So to answer your question, Max, what we're doing is we're in every investment right now asking some simple questions of borrowers. Like Yanic, we would say, is there anything you need to do to think about flood, fire, climate volatility as you build this? And if you spend a little bit extra now, but that increases your resiliency, it's actually quite stunning how the math works. You're very better off to spend an extra 5 or 10% now if that's what it takes to be resilient to likely events. So we're trying to factor that into our investment decisions and get borrowers, the people who are actually building infrastructure, to be thinking that way, because I think it's essential as we build stuff that's going to last 30, 50, 75, 100 years.
And maybe I'll just move on to the last topic, because we can't have a session without talking about AI. And so as we think about digital transformation and the impact on infrastructure, in addition to creating a whole new class of infrastructure investments in data centers and fiber and other digital investment opportunities, it's also impacting how traditional infrastructure, transportation infrastructure is being built, how it's impacting. So, Mameetse, where are the opportunities that you're seeing on the digital side, and how is it changing the perspectives? You mentioned the investments in data centers, but is there anything, other changes, other impacts that it's had?
Yeah, from a South African perspective, obviously this sector is very much private sector led, as in it's dominated by the private sector. We've demonopolized the space many, many years ago, so it's very open market and open access or open economy, etc. From where I'm sitting, the greatest opportunity though lies in digitizing government, just to give a quick example, so if an independent power producer, to reach financial close, they need almost 86 different types of permits, licenses, etc., just to reach financial close. And all of that is sitting within government, whether it's local government, regulatory agencies, etc. So, but everything is paper-based. all those submissions, they move from one end to the other, and it's all paper-based. But if you can digitize that, we know that we've worked with one of the consulting firms, and they did indicate that if we can digitize government services and access to information and processes, we can literally unlock 1.5 trillion rand of value in the economy just by doing that. And so for me, that remains the greatest opportunity for us from an ICT or digital communications infrastructure perspective. Thanks.
Michael, how about you? Have you been thinking about digital transformation and how that impacts the banks and what types of project the banks are looking at? Does it change the different opportunities?
Let me just pick up the thread on AI and data centers that you introduced, because for me, life, especially policy, is always around balance. And one of the facts that I stumbled into a couple of days ago was in the U.S. right now, you look at the amount of CapEx being done or announced, half in the whole country relates to AI infrastructure. And I worry a little bit about that as a Canadian because we have a finite capacity of amount of money to invest. There's a finite amount of capacity of construction-related resources. There's also a finite amount of capacity of electricity. And is that the best and optimal use of that capacity? So it's all about balance. But I do worry a little bit, Ehren, in this as we kind of move forward, that there's so much. It's relatively simple in the scheme of things to get these the AI infrastructure kind of set up. There's a little bit of a kind of first in, first out approach. We run the risk of perhaps losing our sense of balance and dialing a little bit too much on that aspect of infrastructure at the expense of these other more complicated, higher risk nation building projects.
Yeah, well, we're not there yet in Canada, so it doesn't seem like we'll be following that trend, as at least not the same way it is in the U.S. But as it is so much private sector developed and invested in. And Ehren, what about you on the digital side? Is it changing the types of projects you're looking at, thinking about things differently?
Just add 2 points. Well, firstly, I do think that as you say, Mameetse, I think it's similar here. This has largely been private sector led. I think where the opportunities for us to support, they're twofold. One is around power. As Michael said, like what our data centers at the root of them, a lot of them is around access to abundant, low cost, and clean energy. So that's one place that I think the CIB can help fill gaps. And the other is for small and mediums. It's like, I don't know if I don't sound too high, like too fancy about this, but it's like the democratization of access. Like the hyperscalers, the Amazon's, they're gonna build their stuff, but it's about creating capacity for innovative entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized Canadian businesses who can't upfront necessarily contract for capacity. And so how do you create data compute capacity for that market is something we're looking at as a public good. But the other thing you asked in your question, I'll just really quickly say, and I don't know others have viewed this, but every project we look at is a technology project. There's no airport that isn't a technology or road or like it is baked into. So in a different way of asking your question, every one of the projects we're building, the most what sounds like water and wastewater, stormwater management are highly technology-driven projects now, and so we're seeing that in almost every project we screen and assess, and that we think that's great. We're happy to invest in. Again, it's a little bit like my resiliency point. I'd rather spend a little bit more upfront to get a project that delivers more value.
Yeah, I would imagine that a project that comes at you that's not leveraging technology is not something that would be as attractive as an investment.
Oh, exactly.
Well, we're about 40 seconds left on our session. Wrapping it up, just obviously clearly huge amount of investment needed and opportunity continues to be there. I'm really excited by the creative approach that everyone's talking about. We're not trying to fit it into, one type of model or solely relying on public funding and trying to find ways to leverage all of the different sources of capital that can support infrastructure development. So it's exciting opportunities ahead in both Canada and South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you.